you all for joining us. The Columbian is pleased to welcome candidates for State Attorney General. I'm Greg Jane, the editorial page editor. I'll let Ben introduce himself.
My name is Ben Campbell. I'm publisher of the Columbian and member of the Columbian Editorial Board.
And then Callie.
Good morning. I'm Callie Hare. I cover politics for the Columbian, and I will be reporting on this meeting and writing about it, but I won't be participating or asking any questions.
And then we'll move on to the candidates. Take just 1 to 2 minutes for now. Introduce yourselves, maybe explain why you are running, and then after that we'll get to specific policy questions. And so anyway, we'll start with Matt.
Okay, good morning. Thanks for having me. This is great. Unfortunately, it's Zoom, as all of these have been. But I'm Matt Larkin. I'm running for Attorney General, and I'm running because, like a lot of people in this state, I'm frustrated. I got into this race because I just feel like I don't recognize this state anymore. I've got four little kids, a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and I want them to grow up in a state that's heading the right direction. And for the last 7 years, from the recordable stats of 13 to 19, we've seen the frequency in the increase of crime statewide here. And I don't like it. I don't like the trend. It worries me. It concerns me as a father of young kids. And we've seen murder go up by 55%. We've seen the frequency in forcible rape go up by over 106%. We've seen frequency in aggravated assaults go up by over 55%. We've seen the frequency in kidnappings and abductions go up by 92%. And as a father, those things concern me. We've seen human trafficking go way up by nearly 2,000% over the last 7 years. And I don't like the trends. And I'm getting into this race because I want to put more of an emphasis on criminal law in the Attorney General's office, and I want to drive those numbers down. We've seen the homeless issue spiral out of control. We've seen drug addictions go up. We've seen all sorts of things happening here that I don't like. And I want to bring the state back under control. And I want to be proud of I want my kids to be as proud of the state as I am, because I am proud of the state. I'm a really proud lifelong Washingtonian. And I feel like we've just got a lot of work to do, and we need to refocus the office on some of these things and tackling some of these big challenges that we have. And they're big challenges, no doubt about it, but it's a big office. And I think we can do it, and I'm excited to be here and talk through some of these issues. But at the end of the day, I'm just a concerned dad who's in this race running to make it a better place for my kids.
Great, thank you. And Bob?
Thanks, Greg, and thanks so much to the Columbian for hosting us. We really appreciate it. I'm running for re-election, and 2 key focuses for my re-election. Number 1, to continue running an independent law firm on behalf of the people of the state of Washington, and number 2, to continue the focus I've brought to the office on the work we do directly on behalf of the people as the people's law firm. So just very briefly, Greg, to get us started, on the independent side, when I became Attorney General, I of course followed Rob McKenna's Attorney General. I set the tone early on day 1 by keeping every single one of the folks working in his office, every manager, every division chief, his core leadership team, even his chief deputy, who was recently appointed by the president to be the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Washington, his communications director, who was a well-known Republican. Her political party preference or those of the others on the staff did not concern me. I knew they had a reputation for running an independent law firm. That's why I kept them on, and that's why many of them are still there doing work on behalf of the people. A key part of that job is defending and enforcing all Washington state laws, whether you personally agree with those or not. We've done that and done that well. It's worth pointing out my opponent has a different perspective. He attended a political rally that your newspaper reported on in late August. About 100 people inside a room in violation of state law and the governor's emergency proclamation. Very few masks, no social distancing. My opponent went there and spoke at that event. Look, I think if you're going to run for Attorney General to be the state's leader on defending and enforcing the law, you can't violate the law while you're doing that to pursue your political goals. And we'll hope to spend a little time on the work we do directly on behalf of the people. But in a nutshell, look, before I was Attorney General, we did not do civil rights work on behalf of the people of the state of Washington. I created a civil rights division. It's now the best in the country. Consumer protection. We'd had 1 consumer protection trial in 17 years before I was the Attorney General. Now we take on powerful interests like Comcast to court and beat them because I beefed up that division substantially. We've created an environmental enforcement team. We did not do that work before on behalf of the state. We recently settled a case against Monsanto for nearly $100 million, the bulk of that which goes to the state general fund to take on the challenges we have. So in the cases and the work we do directly on behalf of the people, there's been a complete transformation in the office in terms of the resources we have, and that's work that'll continue in the next 4 years as well. Thanks again for having us. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you, and thanks again to both of you for joining us. Bob, let's start with Matt's assertion at the top. One, have crime rates gone up by the numbers that he suggests, and what role should the Attorney General play in combating that?
Sure, so the Attorney General plays a key role. We have a criminal justice division. As I think you know, Greg and others on this call, I think we've talked about in past editorial board meetings, the AG's office, unlike other states, does not have what we call original criminal jurisdiction to bring criminal charges against anybody. We have a small criminal division. We can bring cases when a county prosecutor gives us that case, asks us to take over a case. So we do that particularly in smaller jurisdictions that don't have the resources to take on, for example, a murder case. So we have a partnership with law enforcement all across the state and team that specializes particularly in major crimes, violent crimes, that type of thing. So the Attorney General, obviously in that role, has an important function. In terms of statistics, I guess I'll be curious if Matt would forward where those come from. He made this assertion at the Everett Herald the other day. I sent to the Everett Herald some numbers that we have, which is while the number in terms of violent crimes, obviously the number of crimes have gone up, our population is dramatically larger than it was 8 years ago. But according to WASPIC, the Washington Association of Police Chiefs and Sheriffs, they track this every year and report that the percentage of violent crime has remained constant over the past 8 years. We're happy to forward that information to you, Greg. If Matt has a specific number about a specific type of crime, happy to engage on that as well and get information to you. But I would say that regardless of what the statistics are, crime's a problem. It's a big problem. And that's why we lead a team in my office that takes that on. I might also add we do important work on making sure that sexually violent predators remain at McNeil Island. We litigate those cases constantly. We have a whole team that does it. And we actually do that work on behalf of 38 of the 39 counties. I'm personally involved in those cases and making decisions how we're going to handle those to make sure we keep our community safe, not just for my kids who are upstairs zooming into their classwork, but for all kids and around the state as well. So it's important work, and we're proud to do it.
Matt, where do those numbers come from? And is that per capita or is that the raw?
No, that's I mean, that's from Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs Annual Crime in Washington Report, 2019, which is the most recent one. Obviously, I don't think they have the 2020 numbers in. But it's the source that's commonly used. There's nothing strange about it. But the point is the upward trend.
But is that per capita?
Oh, no, it's not per capita.
Okay.
But it does. But Mr. Ferguson's right. The population of Washington has grown 9 to 10% over the last 7 years. So we do need to factor that in. But these are still, even factoring that in, that doesn't account for the drastic uptick in crime. And we need to do something about it.
But how would you have the Attorney General do something about that?
Sure, my opponent's right. The Attorney General does have a criminal prosecuting division. They do handle criminal matters. And my goal is to increase that and refocus the office to handle even more of those criminal matters. Some of these are crimes that county prosecutors can't handle. Some of them are crimes that cities don't have the resources for. And I want to train up a team of specialized prosecutors in the Attorney General's office to offer our assistance to these counties and cities. Now, by statute, cities can't ask for help yet. It's only county. You can only step in as Attorney General if the county prosecutor or the governor asks you to help. But I would lobby the legislature to open that up to city prosecutors. We just need to give them the help and resources they need. And we need to get behind law enforcement who are out there on the front lines trying to do these things. I've been endorsed by 10 county sheriffs thus far, and that number seems to be growing all the time. I've been endorsed by Ken Eikenberry, former Washington Attorney General, who was the one who actually put more of a criminal heavy bent to the Attorney General's office back, I believe, in the 80s. And I've been endorsed by Rob McKenna, who also agrees with my crime plan and that we need to do something about it. So the numbers, I mean, they're there and we can pick apart and say this minutia here and this minutia there. But overall, the trend is up and it's not a good trend. And even if the numbers weren't there, you walk around our cities and you would just know something's not right. Things have not been getting better. Things do not feel safer. Things do not feel better. And that's just an objective opinion. as you walk around Seattle and Everett and Vancouver and Yakima and Spokane. And as I'm out talking to people and Zooming with people and listening to people, that's what I hear too. Things are not headed the right direction, and all I'm in here to do is try to fix it and get things headed back down.
If you would enhance the office's criminal prosecutions, then what would you de-emphasize? Or would you increase staff and budget?
No, I don't think we need to do that. I think we have a very big Attorney General's office. We're about the 5th largest in the country. We're not the 5th biggest state in the union. I think we're around the 17th largest state in the union. So there should be room to do that. We've got a lot of lawsuits being filed against the federal government right now, and there's attorneys and resources in there we could reallocate. I think we just filed, we as in the state, and this Attorney General just filed this. I'm confused, actually. I can't keep up with them. 77 or the Seattle Times reported 80 lawsuits against President Trump, but a few days ago, the Attorney General said it was 77. So somewhere between 77 and 80, but that's a lot. And we could maybe focus some of that attention and resources towards solving some of these problems here in this Washington.
So do you not think that those lawsuits are a good use of time and resources?
I think 80 lawsuits against a sitting president is a lot. I'm not saying there's never a time to sue a sitting president. There's always a time when that's a tool in your belt that you can use as Attorney General. I don't think it should be the primary tool. We shouldn't be spending that much time focused on Washington, D.C., especially. Do you have
specific lawsuits that you would not have pursued?
I probably wouldn't have pursued. There was plenty I wouldn't have pursued. There was some on ceiling fan emissions. There was one against noise pollution, suing the U.S. Navy base in Whidbey Island. Those are things that can be left for other times and other states and other people to deal with. Again, we have real problems here. These statistics are alarming and should be alarming. And I wouldn't be focused nearly as heavily on suing a sitting president as this Attorney General is.
Bob, how many times has your office sued the Trump administration?
80 times. And one statistic that my opponent will never mention to any audience or any editorial board is those lawsuits actually have outcomes. We have decisions from those cases. And we have now, I think it's 36 decisions on those cases. And our track record, Greg, isn't too bad. We've won 35 of those 36 cases. We're 35-1. We've won cases in the trial court, Court of Appeals, and even the United States Supreme Court. So what that demonstrates is we're in good cases. One more thing I'll add to that is Matt likes to always say I'm focused on the wrong Washington. Well, guess what? There's a reason why people care about our presidential election. That's because they understand who we elect as president has a significant impact on our lives here in Washington state. Decisions made by an administration impact Washingtonians. In fact, I can't even bring a case before a federal court unless I can show to the judge, and I'm challenging this every time I bring a case, unless I can show to the judge that there's a harm to Washingtonians and or to our environment. Otherwise, I can't get in the courtroom. So the fact that we won 35 out of 36, I think, demonstrates, as a factual matter, we're bringing cases in which there's a harm to Washingtonians and we're winning. I might add that Matt likes to sort of sound very rational about talking about these cases. When he's speaking to his supporters, and we have plenty of video of this if you're interested in seeing it, he literally mocks me for bringing these cases. He refers to us chasing rabbit trails. And at the Seattle Times editorial board, he made it clear he would not have filed the first lawsuit in which we successfully challenged the first version of the Muslim travel ban. So it's my job and duty as Attorney General, if there's a harm to the people of my state or to our environment, and we have good legal arguments, it's my duty to bring that lawsuit on behalf of the people, no matter who is causing that harm. It simply happens to be the president right now. If I can have one more thing on the, by the way, I should also say when it comes to the president, I'm surprised to hear Matt say he would file any lawsuits because he has said to his supporters things like, he loves everything that the president is doing. I love that he doesn't care. He has great policies. That does not sound like someone who's going to take on a president of his own party. And just on the criminal side, by the way, just to wrap up that conversation, look, the idea of asking the legislature to have city attorneys hand off city offenses to the AG's office, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. It's just worth emphasizing those are misdemeanors, right? The work we do, what I'm focused on are serious violent crimes. That's where the expertise in my office is best utilized. Matt has spoken publicly about wanting to emphasize charging petty crime and petty theft. That's a quote of his. That's one approach, I think, to a crime in our society. I think that the best resources, best use of our office is on the violent crimes. That's where our team can help smaller counties like a murder that we successfully charged in Ferry County recently to help out those jurisdictions. And lastly, using my office, one thing I can do as Attorney General and have done is make changes to state law for additional protections for the public. In my time as Attorney General, I've worked with law enforcement in a bipartisan fashion with legislators of both parties to pass additional penalties for elder abuse, extending the statute of limitation for the sexual exploitation of a child, courthouse security, human trafficking, strengthen our sexually violent predator laws. All those are bills I've brought to the legislature, worked with Republicans as sponsors, working with law enforcement to get those bills passed to make our community safer.
Thank you. I want to go back. Matt, is that an accurate quote regarding President Trump?
It's accurate with a lot of dots. I've been very open about this. Here's my take on President Trump. I'm frustrated as a Republican. I don't like his rhetoric. I think it's bombastic. It's not my style. It's not the way I conduct myself. But I do like some of his policies. I like lower taxes, and I do like cutting regulations. And I you know, some of these things that he does, I support. I support his policy towards Israel wholeheartedly. But I do have trouble with the rhetoric, and so does my wife, and so do a lot of people. So we kind of cringe.
You support cutting regulations. Does that include environmental regulations?
No,
have you seen
no.
Have you seen any of those that you would have sued the administration over?
I mean, there's so many regulations on the books right now. No, I couldn't point to a specific one. But in general, as a Republican, I support smaller, streamlined government and transparent government. And the regulatory burden. I'm a business owner in this state. My grandfather started a manufacturing company, 50 years ago, almost exactly, 51 years ago. And we're a third generation company. We're proud of what we do here. We manufacture waterworks pipeline products. We bring clean drinking water to people in places all over the world. And it's hard to do business here. This is not a business friendly state. It just is. That's the matter of fact. It's very difficult. And
so are you going to vote for President Trump?
You know, I don't want to answer that. I'm a Republican, yes, and you know, I'll support the Republican nominee,
Which is Donald Trump.
But at the end of the day, I'm not focused on that. I'm focused on fixing this Washington, and we've got a lot of problems here. I'm not going to dabble in Washington, D.C. too much unless it's an absolute necessity, because I'm running to be Attorney General of Washington State.
Bob, as a Democrat, are you going to vote for Joe Biden?
Of course, yeah. And I'll just add that, Rick, I will send you the video of him speaking about Donald Trump. He said it's somehow a lot of dots. It's literally, the quote is, "I support everything the president is doing. I love that he doesn't care." So look, those aren't the words of, I mean, Matt's obviously entitled to his opinion about Donald Trump. I disagree, but he can't say that's his view of the president and then act like, well, of course he would have challenged the president on certain things. No, and we'll be happy to pass on multiple videos. The way he speaks about the litigation against the Trump administration, I think, Rick, I just want to emphasize, those are applause lines for him before his Republican base, in which he literally mocks the work we are doing to take on the president, hold him accountable to the rule of law. And look, if you're one of 18,000 dreamers in this state, you're only still here in this state because Washington State co-led a lawsuit against the administration that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we won. That's not a Washington, D.C. thing, right? That is a Washington State thing for those 18,000 dreamers, and literally where they can live. Can they still work in a business in Clark County? Can they still go to school in Clark County? Can they still be a part of our community here in Washington State? These cases all, by definition, have a profound impact on our state, on our clean air, on our clean water. And look, for me to turn a blind eye to what this administration would be doing would frankly be a dereliction of my duty as Attorney General on behalf of the people. And that's a clear contrast with my opponent.
Would you have sued the administration for their change to the DACA?
To the DACA?
Yeah.
That one is no, because there were 14 other states filing onto that one in Washington, D.C. We weren't the only state leading that charge. And I wouldn't have done that. I probably would have let other states take the charge because I would have been focused here If we were the only state who were being harmed and we were the only state who could help with that situation, I don't know, we would have considered it. Like any lawsuit, like any action. And again, I want to point out, this is not a partisan office. I would consider lawsuits against a President Biden, and I would certainly stand up to a President Trump if that day were to come. I felt there was a lawsuit that harmed Washingtonians, and we were the only ones who could bring recourse to that. So it doesn't have to be a partisan thing. I know Mr. Ferguson likes to say he's sued President Trump 80 times and that he's also sued President Obama so that he's bipartisan. But I think how many times, I don't know. I think he's sued President Obama once or twice, which is a drastic difference. And it's too many lawsuits against a sitting president. And when it becomes the only tool that you use and the only thing you focus on, and then a fundraising letter goes out after each lawsuit, it starts to make the office feel very partisan. And it starts to make the citizens of Washington lose faith in the nonpartisanship of the office. And we need to bring it back to neutral a little
along
bit.
those lines. Okay, if I assume Bob is accurate when he says his office is 35-1 against Trump in cases that have been decided. To me, that indicates that the administration was breaking the law. Isn't it the Attorney General's job to stand up to that?
Sure, but you could find instances all over the place where administrations could be challenged on things. And
I don't know, 35-1 is pretty compelling evidence.
Well, it depends on the math you're using. I think Bob's using some numbers here that he's picking forums that are friendly to him. He filed two lawsuits ago, he filed in Yakima. And I wasn't sure why that was filed in Yakima, other than there must have been a friendly judge out there. And you can I'd actually like to hear the Attorney General's answer to this, because it seems, from what I'm digging and doing my legal research, it seems like some of those victories he's counting the wins, but he's not counting the same losses. So if a judge dismisses it, and he was a party to a suit that was filed with another, if there was a case filed with another state, for instance, and we jump onto that one, and the judge dismisses it, we're not counting that as a loss. But if the judge didn't dismiss it, we're counting that as a win. So there's some smoke and mirrors there, and I'm actually genuinely interested in hearing how we're calculating these wins and losses.
Bob, does the math add up?
Yeah, there's an awful lot to unpack from that last comment. So let me just try and start with some of those. First of all, the idea of filing in friendly forums and filing in Yakima. This, by the way, is a case he's referring to on the United States Postal Service against the Postmaster General on the changes to service that have impacted mail for senior citizens, for veterans getting their medications, and for ballots, by the way. But to be clear, we have two federal courts in Washington, the Western District, west of the mountains, and the Eastern District, east of the mountains. There are, of course, many judges in those districts. We don't choose the judge we are in front of. You file in a court, and the court does a selection process on their own, so you get whatever judge that happens to be. For the first Muslim travel ban, for example, Greg, we filed in the Western District of Washington. The judge we got, Judge Robart, was a Republican appointee. No one's idea of a liberal judge. We won that case, okay? So we got Judge Bastian in the Eastern District of Washington. That's just a random thing that the Eastern District does. And by the way, speaking of sort of friendly forums, one of our cases recently was before a panel on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. In that case,
where's the Second Circuit?
And so Second Circuit back east, New York area.
Okay.
So our cases are often all around the country.
Right.
And so in that case, for example, the panel, again, random allocation, the panel we received, Matt, was 3 judges, all appointed by Donald Trump. We won that case 3-0. Now, so Matt, you can just say these things, okay, about friendly forums. Honestly, no lawyer would have any idea what on earth you are talking about. We don't get to pick our judges. We have won in front of judges appointed by Donald Trump and by Democratic presidents over and over and over again. Number 2, I think it's in terms of the numbers, Matt, you can say they're not accurate. I guess I welcome you to actually show that. We have on our website, and have from day one, from the first case we filed, kept a transparent list of every case we have filed against this administration. Every single one, Greg. We provide great detail about that. And we call the balls and strikes as we win or as we lose. And so, look, Matt, you're going to have to do a whole lot better than saying it's smokes and mirrors. No newspaper, no reporter, nobody has said our record is inaccurate. And I would challenge you to actually bring some evidence that that is the case. Otherwise, you just can't. I understand when you speak to your base, you can just say stuff. You can say things like you did at the Clark County event you're at. You say things like, Bob Ferguson's never had a real job. You got people who laugh at that line. Look, Matt, you don't know me. You don't know the first thing about me. You can say that to your base, but I'm not going to let you say that here from this editorial board and disparage dishwashers, people who work to clear land, people who are educators, people who work with people on the margins of society, all work I have done, by the way, honorable work. And so, look, I get in your campaign, you speak to your base, you call me names like a henchman, you say I'm a bad guy, you say I've disgraced the office, you say I'm a bully, you say I'm corrupt. Fine, you can say those things, but look, I'm not going to let you get away with it. I'm going to call you out on it here from this editorial board and others as well.
And Matt, have you referred to Bob as a bully?
I don't remember any of the specifics he's talking about. Language on the campaign trail can get that way. And actually, in the last editorial board, I told Bob I would ratchet it down a little bit if I had, and I'd like him to ratchet down some of his fundraising emails about me too. They're pretty bombastic in and of themselves.
Just be clear, Greg. We have video of each and every one of those comments and many more. And by the way, he does not say that in a relatively calm tone of voice like I'm using right now. Rather, they're at a rally where he's getting folks fired up. We have video and audio of each and every one of those and many more if you want it. And look, Matt, please do not compare your language on the campaign trail that is deeply personal with my emails. I'm happy to compare those anytime. If you've got a problem, you let me know. But look, there is no place in this day of campaign rhetoric and so out of hand at the national level. You're running for attorney general. You're violating state law as you do it in pursuit of a political office. You're calling me names over and over again in a deeply personal way. You say I've never had a real job. I don't know what, I mean, rise above it, Matt. Really.
So I'm curious, Matt, so part of the Attorney General's job is to defend Washington law. It, I think, is one of you mentioned, whether you agree with it or not. Would you defend I-1639 in court?
I would. That was I didn't support it, but I would absolutely defend it because you're right. That is the job of the Attorney General. That one was passed with around 60% of the state's population or voting population. So yeah, whether you agree with the laws or not, that's what you do as Attorney General. You enforce them.
So what do you think about sheriffs around the state who have said they won't enforce it?
Frankly, I disagree with it. I think that it's up to the sheriffs. They have some discretion on how they carry out their enforcement. They're not going to. Certainly, they can choose whether or not to cite you for jaywalking, and a lot of times they don't. That's a decision they make. What I struggle with is them openly saying it, because I think it is a dangerous precedent. I think any time that an elected official, and sheriffs are elected, says I'm going to openly not enforce this law and the world can know about it because I disagree with it and because I think it's unconstitutional, then you get into slippery slope. It's a dangerous place to be because, frankly, I wouldn't want liberal sheriffs doing that. I wouldn't want conservative sheriffs doing that. There's a system in place to challenge laws you disagree with, and it's up through the courts. And we need to be very careful, especially when you're an elected official like a sheriff, on how you verbalize those things and the message and example that sends.
Matt, I'm curious, how big is the Attorney General's office and what is the budget?
The office is between 1,100 and 1,200 people. I think it's around 600 of those are lawyers. The budget's around $190 million, but then there's supplementals added on, I believe. So it's a very big office.
Is that the annual budget or the biennium? That's
the biannual.
Okay, Bob, are those numbers accurate?
It's close. It's a little larger in terms of the budget, but that's more or less that is correct. Yes.
Okay. And Matt, as mentioned, the office is kind of a law firm on behalf of the people of Washington. Have you ever worked in a large firm like that?
No, I haven't. My background. Sorry, I just had an advertisement pop up in your there. Um, my background is not a law firm background. My background is totally different. I went to Gonzaga, got my law degree, got my master's of law at George Washington Law School, which is an LLM degree. I worked in the White House for President George W. Bush. I did a short time as a prosecutor in Pierce County, and during my third year of law school, I prosecuted in Spokane County as an extern. And the bulk of my career has actually been working at my family's manufacturing company. So I've been working at the business with my dad and my brother, and trying to grow a business and keep over 500 people employed there. So I've been doing legal work for the company and also a whole bunch of other stuff as an owner. You wear a lot of different hats, but that's the bulk of my experience. And I don't think you have to have a litigation law firm background to run the Attorney General's office. I think what you need, and what we need now more than ever, is a fresh perspective. We need the perspective of a management, of a business owner, of someone out on the streets, actually not a career politician, someone who's out there dealing with this stuff every single day. And I think that's what the office needs now more than ever.
So you say not a career politician. Would you consider, is this a political office, or how would you describe the office?
Well, you have to run on a party. You have to pick a party to run for the office, which makes it innately political. I could make a good case on another panel that maybe we should take the party affiliation out of it, just because it's a law and order and it's a justice-based position. I feel like there could be a good argument for politicizing it, but it is a political office. So you do run. It's an executive office. You're elected by the people of the state of Washington, and yeah. So I guess by definition, I guess you're a politician if you're running the office because you were elected. But does that answer your question? I guess I'm not sure what.
No,
Okay.
It's kind of a vague question. I think. Yeah, some of us would argue that the moment you decide to run for office, you're a politician.
Okay.
But Bob, any other thoughts? Anything else we should ask?
Sorry, in terms of the office being a political office?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say I agree with Matt, sir, his definition that, hey, if it's a political office by definition, as I think he said, when you run for office, by definition, you have a party label. That is the structure. I think a couple things I would add to that is, while it is a political office in that sense, there has been a long tradition in our office of running it in an independent manner. I mentioned keeping all of Rob McKenna's, literally all of his core leadership team, all of his division chiefs, literally his chief deputy as well. Rob McKenna did the same with Chris Gregoire's team. So that is an important tradition in our office that, by the way, is very different than most AG offices. When a new AG comes in, often there's a big change in leadership, and that's both Democrats and Republicans. I also say there's lots of different paths for having a background to be the Attorney General. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I will just say that Matt mentioned that he was an extern in the Spokane Prosecuting Attorney's Office. He's saying that only because I did a public records request, because at numerous political events, including the one at Clark County he spoke at in August, he's referred to himself as a criminal prosecutor in Spokane. Literally, we have him on more than a dozen times as he gives his introduction saying he was a criminal prosecutor in Spokane. We did a public records request on that, Greg, and we got back one document. It's a volunteer form with his name on it. We wrote back and said, well, wait a second, that can't be right. Mr. Larkin says he was a criminal prosecutor. And they wrote back and said the prosecuting attorney's office has no record of Mr. Larkin ever being a prosecutor or a deputy prosecutor for the Spokane County Prosecutor's Office. The reason he's now telling you he was an intern or an extern there is only because I mentioned that at a recent editorial board meeting. So when he was at that Clark County rally, he was violating state law. He was saying, I've never had a real job. And he was telling that audience he'd been a criminal prosecutor in Spokane County, which is actually not true. I just think on multiple levels, whatever your background is, you got to be straight with the people when you're running for that office of what that experience actually is. And he's not been straight with the people when it comes to his experience in Spokane. I'm glad, Matt, for the first time today, you are being more direct and candid about that.
Matt, have you said that you were a prosecutor?
I have, and I stand by that. I prosecuted there as a Rule 9 extern in Spokane County. I handled entire courtroom dockets by myself, including bail hearings. And I was working under direct supervision of prosecutors, but they weren't in the courtroom. That was very loosely defined supervision. I worked under Prosecutor Deanna Heibarger and under elected Prosecutor Tucker. and for Brian O'Brien. So I felt like an active prosecutor. I got a lot of experience, a lot of great experience, and I leaned heavily on that. And it was a great time. That's what made me actually want to go into criminal prosecution later. But my family business took me another road.
Great. I think one more question that I wanted to touch on. What role will the Attorney General's office play as the state recovers from the pandemic? And what do you foresee, Bob?
Sure. So first, in the short term, in terms of our office specifically, there's huge budget challenges, obviously, Greg, right, which is primarily the province of the governor and the legislature, not so much the Attorney General. So I guess I'll focus. I don't want to minimize those significant challenges the state has. I want to be clear about that. But in terms of the AG office specifically, a key part of our work right now related to that is, of course, defending the governor's emergency proclamations related to COVID, which have a huge impact on businesses and on people as well. Our ability to go to our local church as we usually would be doing on Sundays. And so our job is to defend those in court, which we've successfully done. Those are put in place by the governor for the health and safety of the people of the state of Washington. There's been about 20 lawsuits challenging those in federal courts, state courts, east of the mountains, west of the mountains. We have successfully defended all those. There's a contrast on this issue as well, not only in the issue that I mentioned that he's violating those orders, my opponent, but he has made it clear that he'd give different legal advice to the governor on those issues, which is surprising, given I've got a professional team who's been very clear that these are lawful and been successful in front of federal and state judges on that. So that's a clear role for us. On the budget side, I will say we can be helpful on that. I think I mentioned at the outset of my remarks, Greg, that we brought an environmental case against Monsanto for effectively dumping in PCBs throughout waterways all through the state of Washington. It was a massive case, a case we never could have brought before I was Attorney General, wouldn't have had the team to do it. That case resolved for close to $100 million. So I was literally able to send a check to the state of Washington, to the general fund for, I forget the exact, it's tens of millions of dollars was what the check was for. And literally just said, here's a check and the state can use that in any way they think feels appropriate. I hope it's for environmental protection related to the case, but our team, my consumer protection team, literally returns hundreds of millions of dollars back to the state, back to the general fund to use in whatever way the state feels is appropriate. We're only able to do that at the level we've been doing it recently because I've enlarged that consumer protection team from about 10 attorneys to 30 and enlarged the professional staff so we can do it by reinvesting the recoveries into the team to grow. And as a result, Washingtonians have received tens of millions of dollars more back as a result. And the state,
is it enough where that team pays for itself at this point?
Exactly right. So if you look at our consumer protection team, our civil rights team, our complex litigation team, our antitrust team, the environmental enforcement team, that's exactly right. So for example, the environmental enforcement team, when we resolved that Monsanto case, Greg, I sent a huge check to the state. I held some money back. And that money is reinvested into those teams to do that work and bring more of those cases. There's an article, I won't go into too much detail, but I'll forward you an editorial from the Tri-City Herald a couple of years ago. They did sort of a deep dive on this, how we do this. And their takeaway was, hey, check your politics at the door. The AG is running this as a business and doing it very well. The winner is the state general fund, the people of the state of Washington, from a budget standpoint, as we bring more and more of these cases. So, and that essentially goes for the Trump litigation as well, that virtually all the work that we do there comes from those divisions. The civil rights team, for example, there's no general fund dollars. Matt, on the campaign trail, you frequently, it's a line you use on every speech you give, is you say everybody's paying for it, that every one of you is paying for the Trump litigation. Despite these editorial board meetings where I mention this fact that that's actually not true, you still say it. I invite you to rebut that if you can, but we're happy to share the budget numbers on that. That's how we do it, is by running it as a business, as the Tri-City Herald said. It works, it's good for the people, and it's good for the state's bottom line as well.
And Matt, what should the role of the office be coming out of the pandemic?
Sure. Well, let me just quickly respond to the last thing that he said. That's money that we got. Yeah, we won these settlements, and that money is being allocated across the state, and some of it back into the Attorney General's office. And my point is, if it's expensive to file 80 lawsuits against a president. So that money, someone's paying for it. And if that money wasn't being earmarked for those lawsuits against the federal government, it could be better spent trying to solve and fix some of these problems here in this state. That's my point. It's not about where the money, what the money is. It's about where's the money going. And that's my point when I say that. It is the taxpayers' money ultimately, so we are all paying for it. So I stand by that. What should be the AG's office in recovery? I think a lot. I have been open about this too. I think the governor, initially we gave him a great deal of leeway as citizens when the lockdown happened, and I was public about it. I said he has some legal runway here to do the things he's doing. But then he started to get out of bounds a little bit, in my opinion, with selectively picking who can do what. You can go to a pot shop and you can go to a liquor store, but you can't go to a house of worship. You can be a union contractor and get back to work, but not a private contractor. You can sit out in the middle of a lake in a boat, but not if you have a fishing pole. And it just started to feel very political. And it started to feel like he was picking winners and losers. It felt like Walmart can stay open, but not a mom and pop store on Main Street who sells soccer uniforms. It just felt, it started to feel very political, and it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And I
then
think
would you defend the lawsuits against the shutdown?
I'm sorry?
Would you defend the shutdown when it faces a lawsuit?
I think as Attorney General, you're also legal advisor to the governor. So I would have given him different advice at the outset. I would have said, look, you're making this a partisan issue that doesn't have to be. Maybe you should call a special session and bring more people in on this so that it feels less partisan and less dictatorial. I can't speak to that because I'm not the Attorney General and I don't have a relationship with the governor. But I would have given him different legal advice.
Okay. Greg, if I can just add one thing, Greg, sorry, but
yeah.
I just want to be clear, we're clear about that. You asked him if he would defend the governor's emergency proclamations. He said, I can't speak to that. Look, it is the job of the Attorney General to do precisely that. And I get that Matt feels that it's political. He says that things feel political a lot, but this has been litigated by some very good advocates on the other side, by the way, in federal courts, in state courts, and there's been only one result so far, Greg. The state of Washington has successfully defended those proclamations each and every time. So the idea that something feels political, I get as a campaign statement, but we're talking about the law and the duty of the Attorney General to defend the laws, even if you personally disagree with those. And I just want to make sure I highlighted that.
And Matt, I have one other follow-up question. As Bob just mentioned, he kept the previous staff on in the office. Would you do the same if you became Attorney General?
There'd be some turnover. I'd bring in people I trusted. I'd also keep a lot of people. That's a big staff. I'm not going to obviously start making huge cuts, but I would bring certain people in I trusted. I've never run for office before, and I want good counsel around me, and I want good attorneys around me. And I would certainly keep some, and I'd certainly bring in some of my own. And that's how I would approach it.
And I'm curious about that. Having never run for office now, why start with state attorney general? Did you consider county prosecuting attorney, or?
I did, yeah. But this is where I thought I could make the biggest difference. My wife and I talked for months about this. Where can we make the biggest impact? Where can we change our state the most? Where can we make it a safer place the most? And we prayed about it, frankly, and Attorney General was where we landed. And it seems like an office where we can make a big difference. And that's what I plan to do on day one.
Okay, we'll move on now. Give us your final pitch for why voters should support you, and feel free to mention any notable endorsements, and we'll start with Matt.
Okay. Well, it's a similar pitch to the start of this. I don't like the way the state's going. I don't feel safe. My family doesn't feel safe, and people that I talk to do not like the direction the state is going. You can walk around the city streets, any of them, frankly, and notice that things have gotten worse. There's homeless camps where there weren't before. There's needles on the streets. There's tents in parks. And I don't like that. That doesn't feel right to me. And I think the Attorney General is a unique office where you can stand up and lead. You can say, look, everyone, we need to come together. We need to solve these problems. We have got to do something about it because things are getting worse. We need to start getting those trend lines going down in the right direction. This is a beautiful place. I love this state. I love our city. I love Washington State. But things have got to change. You can't keep doing the same things and expect different results. We need fresh eyes. We need a fresh approach. We need to roll up our sleeves and get to work. And that's what I intend to do. I've got a plan, as I mentioned, that's endorsed by Ken Eikenberry. I'm endorsed by 10 county sheriffs. I'm endorsed by Rob McKenna. I'm endorsed by Dino Rossi, by Dave Reichert, former King County Sheriff and U.S. Congressman. I'm endorsed by elected officials all over the state. And I'm proud of that. These are people who also share my vision for what Washington could be and where we could go if we just got a fresh set of eyes on old problems. And that's, I mean, the fullest of my endorsements are on my website, and I can't rattle them all off, but those are some notable ones. And I think the time now is just to get a fresh approach to things and start to change the state and get it back to where we feel comfortable taking our kids downtown, and that elderly couples feel comfortable going on a walk around the block, which my grandmother does not feel safe doing right now. And it's sad. And I think we just need to change things. And that's why I'm running, and that's why I'm in this race.
And I'm just curious on those endorsements. Are there any prominent Democrats who have endorsed you?
No, not yet.
Okay.
We're working on it.
Just curious.
Sure.
Bob, give us your final pitch.
Sure. Thanks again to all of you for hosting us. We really appreciate it and a chance to talk about the race. Just maybe I'll focus just in the last minute or two we have here, Greg, on one issue. I know we have so many issues we didn't have a chance to get to, but it's one I have strong views about, and it's a big priority for my next term as well. And that's the opioid epidemic that we have, which impacts so many issues. I think we touched on homelessness briefly earlier, for example. Obviously, drug addiction and chemical dependency issues are one of many key drivers on homelessness. And I just want to point out that this is a major priority of mine for the last few years and will be in the next term. Specifically, we have filed, Washington State has been a leader across the country in filing litigation against opioid distributors. These are Fortune 15 companies, huge entities with massive resources for, in our view, illegally fueling the opioid epidemic, which I know you know in Clark County is impacting Clark County and counties all across our state. We're able to bring that case. We have a trial date next spring, if I recall correctly. It got moved recently because of COVID. We are very possibly the first state to bring those distributors to trial because we have a team that can actually do that work. And the goal of that litigation, of course, is accountability for those entities that did not play by the rules, putting profits above tremendous harm to people and individuals and the loss of life, but also for a resolution that brings in large sums of money back into communities. And one thing I hear, I have a goal of speaking to every Rotary Club in the state. I hit 185 out of 190. The last 5 I couldn't get to with COVID, yet to come. But in getting around the state to all those Rotaries and trying to be accessible to people, one thing I would hear over and over and over at those Rotaries were issues related to homelessness, but also drug addiction and opioids specifically. And so that's a big priority going forward. It's a lot of resources we have right now, Greg, that are going into that litigation, as you might imagine. If you're a Fortune 15 company, you can afford a lot of resources to defend yourself in a case that is borderline existential for those entities. So I just want to, just before we left the conversation, want to make sure I mention that issue because it is such a big focus right now of my consumer protection team and my complex litigation team. They're spending a lot of time on that case, but it's one I'm confident that we'll have a positive outcome for the people of the state and hopefully get some resources back into local communities to grapple with the issues we're facing. And again, just want to say thanks so much for all your time and all the questions, and that were so thoughtful, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you for Bob. One final question: have any prominent Republicans endorsed you?
Prominent, I guess not elected Republicans, if that's what you mean. I don't spend a lot of time asking for endorsements, honestly, Greg, but I will say within the legal community, I think nearly 1,000 attorneys, for example, have donated to my campaign. That is a cross section, I can assure you, of Democratic and Republican attorneys all across the state. So the folks who know the law, who follow my office very closely, the legal community are extremely supportive. And I'll check with my team if there are sort of the prominent, I don't believe any Republicans who are elected to office, but to be honest, I haven't asked either.
I thought I asked Matt about Democrats.
Sure.
Should ask you about Republicans.
You bet.
Madam, very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Matt.